Chef and the Chore Boy, episode 6 of Netflix's One Piece adaptation. So this is the Sanji heavy episode. So in the last episode, we were introduced to Sanji and we got to learn a little bit about him. But this is the episode where we get like his origin story and why he has his dream of the all blue and all that stuff. So yeah, we start off with Luffy and the crew trying to treat Zoro. Basically, he's bleeding out. He's going to die. And Nami orders Luffy like, hey, you're the captain. You got to do something. Go into Barate and see if there are any doctors. So Luffy runs into the kitchen where Zeff and Sanji are kind of having an argument, and he's asking for a doctor. And Zeff tells him, like, hey, there's no doctor like anywhere around here. Like, the nearest doctor is probably 2 days away, but I'll see what I can do. And so they gather supplies. They go on to the Going Merry. And Zeff uses his old seaman trick, where he first he sews up Zoro. That's not the trick. The trick is that he starts slicing thin pieces of fish and putting it onto the stitches. And apparently the flesh of the fish helps like cauterize the wound, that helps absorb the blood and keep people from bleeding out. Never really heard of that before, but whatever. Interesting trick. And he puts it on to Zoro, patches him up. He's like, it's touch and go right now. Like, he's in between worlds. Part of him, he has like one foot in the living world, the other in the dead world. You got to talk to him. Just talk to him, tell him stories, make sure he knows that his crew is there by his side, and you got to keep him living. And so, yeah, the crew like takes turns like telling stories to Zoro and just talking to him. And Sanji's there like making food for the group, and he wants to make something for Luffy, and Luffy refuses to eat, which should tell you something that that something's off with Luffy. Instead, he's just too busy polishing up Zoro's sword. And he's like, maybe you should make something for Zoro. Maybe you should make his favorite meal, rice ball. He also likes alcohol. Maybe you should make like a rice ball soaked in beer or something. Maybe he shouldn't eat. Maybe he needs water. Or maybe he just needs sleep. Like, Luffy's pretty much freaking out, but he's trying to keep a calm facade. And eventually Luffy asks Sanji to join his crew. And Sanji refuses. And he says that he has to stay at the Barati. And then he explains his story. And the story is that years ago, he worked on this ship called the Orbit. And as a child, he was working as a chef. Why a ship would have children as chefs, I have no idea. But yeah, he's working on this ship when a bunch of pirates attack. And the pirates are being captained by Zeff. So it turns out that Zeff used to be a pirate. He was a pirate captain. And as he's attacking this ship, he goes down below and he sees one of the meals that Sanji had made. And he's kind of impressed a little bit with it, but he's like, it needs more oregano. And so he starts putting oregano in it, and that's when Sanji gets pissed off. He's like, how dare you change my food? Like, he doesn't care what the pirates are going to do to him. Like, he's not going to die until he finds the all blue. And then a huge wave comes and sinks the ship. Sanji wakes up, and he's on this giant rock, and Zeff is there. And Zeff explains that a wave capsized both our ships. Everyone is dead. We're the only two that made it. And he has 2 bags. One bag is bigger than the other. And he gives the little bag to Sanji. And he's like, here's your food. I want you to go on the other side of this giant rock. And don't bother me unless you see a ship. And Sanji's pissed off. And he's like, why do you get the bigger bag? And Zeff's like, because I'm 3 times your size. So I get the bag that's 3 times bigger than the small one. Now go. So Sanji goes. And we just have like time skips where days pass and Sanji's eating and just trying to pace out his meals so he can survive. And it's like day 50 something. And his food's basically done. He's barely hanging on to life. And so Sanji's like, Zeff had a bigger bag than I did. He's still got to have some food. And I apologize for that airplane noise in the background. So yeah, he marches back to the other side of this island to confront Zeff and try to take some of the food that he has. And when he arrives, he sees Zeff just sitting in the corner, and the bag is untouched. Zeff sees Sanji with the knife, and he's like, what are you doing here, boy? And Sanji explains that I'm going to take your food. And he starts cutting into the bag. And instead of food, he just finds a bunch of treasure. And he's like digging through the treasure, trying to find a food. And he's like, where is it? Where's the food? And Zeff doesn't say anything. And Sanji's like, how are you able to survive for so long if you didn't have any food? And that's when he realizes that Zeff has amputated his own leg and was eating his own leg to survive. And this hits Sanji because he realizes that Zeff gave him all the food. He wasn't hoarding like the bigger bag with most of the food for himself. He gave every single piece of food that they had to Sanji, and instead he was surviving by eating his own leg. And of course, this hits Sanji because Sanji can't believe that a pirate not only saved his life but also gave him all the food and was amputating himself, rather than taking Sanji's food. And he asks him, why did you do that? And Zeff says that we have the same dream. My dream was to find the all blue, and I couldn't find it, and I'm getting too old, and it's just not going to be for me. I have to say goodbye to that dream, but you don't. So if you survive, you can live out our dream of finding the all blue. You can be the one to do it in my stead. And so that's why he saved Sanji. Yeah, because of that, when Zeff opens up the Bharati, Sanji stays and works with him because he owes Zeff his life. And I was like, all right, that's a nice little story. Obviously, it's straight from the manga, but that's a really good flashback. So Arlong shows up on the Bharati with 2 of his crew members. I will say that Arlong's design is pretty cool. I just have a little bit of issue with the nose. I know it's really hard to try to do the saw blade nose from the manga, but it really just looks like they just put a prosthetic on top of a human nose. I would have liked if they designed it a little bit different to try to hide some of the human nose features, kind of cover it up with more of the sawtooth look. Instead, it just looks like the sawtooth was kind of just pasted on a human nose. But other than that, pretty decent design for the Fishman. Yeah, he's looking for Luffy, because Luffy has his map, the map to the Grand Line. We get a little bit of his personality. He's basically racist against humans. He thinks fishmen are, the superiors. He believes that humans are inferior. He doesn't like the way that humans treat fishmen. I guess humans using fishmen to clean up the barnacles and stuff on the bottoms of the ships and stuff. And that fishmen, they're stronger, they're smarter, they're better than humans. And he basically explains that I'm going to sit here, I'm going to eat this meal, and if Luffy doesn't show up, then I'm going to start eating you guys. So let's see what happens. And that's when Nami, she overhears, and she goes back to the Going Merry, and she tells Luffy, hey, we got to get the hell out of here. Arlong and his men are here, they're looking for you. We got to run. And Luffy refuses. And Nami's like, because you didn't listen, look what happened to Zoro. Zoro could die because you didn't stop him. You're the captain. You got to make the tough decisions. And we have this good line from Luffy where he basically explains that, I am the captain. I will make the tough decisions, but I'm not that kind of pirate. I will never, ever stop someone from trying to achieve their dream. So that's why I didn't stop Zoro. As for Arlong, he wants me. If he doesn't get me, he's going to hurt innocent people, and I can't allow that to happen. I can't allow innocents to get hurt or killed because of me. So we're going to go back into the Bharati, and we are going to stop Arlong. So Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp show up at the Bharati, and they basically ask, which one of you is Arlong? And Arlong's like, who's asking? And Luffy says, my name is Monkey D. Luffy. And we have this cool moment where Arlong is like, I thought you would be bigger. And Luffy just kind of looks at him and smirks and says, so was I. And I was like, all right. I feel what you're cooking, Luffy. That was a pretty good burn. Pretty good comeback. That's when we find out that Arlong was able to track down Luffy because of Buggy. And Arlong's men pulls out Buggy's head from inside this bag. And I was so excited because, if you guys haven't guessed already, Buggy is my favorite character in this series next to Zoro. Which is really funny because I didn't give a crap about Buggy in the manga or in the anime. In fact, I actually have a fear of clowns. So I didn't really care for Buggy all that much. But I absolutely love him in this series. I think the actor just nails down the role so freaking good. And every time he's he shows up, he just like eats up the spotlight. He's fantastic. So I was so glad to see Buggy here, especially since this whole moment doesn't happen in the manga or the anime. Arlong never ever shows up to the Baratie. Because this whole scene is like, original, I thought it was very clever how Buggy was able to track down Luffy. Where Buggy's like, don't you remember what I said? I have eyes and ears everywhere. And then Buggy's ear pops out from Luffy's straw hat. It turns out that Buggy has literally bugged Luffy's straw hat with his ear. And so he's like, I was able to hear everything that you guys said since you beat me and my crew. Pardon me, it was on your hat. I overheard everything. So that's how he's able to track down Luffy. And I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. The cool thing about this reveal is that they actually foreshadow it. So I went back and I looked at episode 3 when Buggy meets with Arlong. And if you actually pay attention to Buggy, you'll notice that you can see his left ear, but where his right ear should be is hidden by a bandana. So they actually foreshadowed the fact that his right ear is gone in episode 3, and then they play it off in episode 6. And I was like, all right, that was actually pretty cool. Except it does beg the question on how Luffy never really noticed that. Or Nami, for that matter, because we did have moments where Nami was fixing Luffy's straw hat. And we did have a moment in the previous episode where Luffy's like picking parts of his straw hat that got damaged when Garp was shooting cannonballs at him. So I was like, how did none of you notice the ear shape in Luffy's little headband on his hat? Whatever, though. Let's just not question that too much. Buggy's there. He told Arlong, where Luffy's at. So then we get a fight where Luffy fights off against Arlong. And Luffy's not able to beat Arlong. He holds his own. He's able to get some good hits. He's doing more damage than Arlong was expecting him to do. But eventually Arlong, the fight goes outside and Arlong throws seawater onto Luffy and basically drains him of his powers and energy and stuff. And then he grabs Luffy and he's about to eat Luffy when Nami shows up. And Nami has the map of the Grand Line. She is aware of who Arlong is, and it's revealed that Nami was working for Arlong the entire time. She even has a tattoo of Arlong's Jolly Roger on her shoulder. And yeah, she betrays the crew. And she tells Arlong, why are you going to bother eating a gum fruit user? Just let the sea deal with him. And Arlong tosses Luffy into the ocean, and Luffy starts drowning. And Nami disappears with Arlong, and the grand map goes with her. And Sanji dives into the water and saves Luffy in a scene that a lot of the ladies are going to enjoy, because you get Sanji shirtless. And I got to say, the dude does a good job of working out. Dude's got a six-pack. So yeah, Sanji saves Luffy from drowning. And Luffy is emotionally destroyed by the fact that Nami has betrayed them. So yeah, this entire scene is original to the TV series. Like I mentioned earlier, Arlong never shows up to Baratie in the manga or the anime. Instead, Krieg, who Mihawk killed in the previous episode, he's the one that actually shows up to the Baratie and he attacks the place. And that's why Mihawk eventually shows up to Baratie, is to finish off Krieg. So because that never happened, because Mihawk killed Krieg on an island before he came to Baratie, and because he comes to Baratie for a different reason, that never happens. And yeah, because Arlong never shows up to Baratie, this whole fight scene and stuff and betrayal doesn't happen this way. Instead, what happens is Nami ditches the crew. She steals the Going Merry and leaves for Arlong while everyone is on Baratie. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I do like the fact that we have Arlong showing up and him fighting the crew and stuff like that, like the Luffy Arlong fight. That's all cool and stuff. And I do love the fact that because of that, we get Buggy. I'm always going to be happy with more Buggy in this series. And I do think the whole ear thing is clever, even though it doesn't make all that much sense that no one noticed the ear in the hat all this time. So I do like all that. But I will say it does portray Nami as kind of more of a witch. if I'm going to just use the words nicely. Because, yeah, like I said, here, she basically tells Arlong to throw Luffy in the sea knowing that he's going to drown because he's a Gum Gum user. She had no idea that Sanji was going to save him. She had no idea that anyone was going to be able to jump in and save him. So she was just basically taking the shot in the dark that someone was going to come along and rescue Luffy before he drowns. I mean, I guess it was either that or having Arlong eat Luffy, but still, it makes Nami look like she took a huge gamble and she was just lucky that it paid off because, I mean, obviously, as you can probably guess, Nami is eventually going to join the crew again. I don't think that's a spoiler for anyone who's new to this series. But yeah, I don't know how I really feel about this whole betrayal scene. Anyways, let's move on. He returns to the ship where Zoro is still resting unconscious. And he talks to Zoro and basically begs Zoro to wake up. Zoro eventually does wake up. And Zoro, like in a moment of clarity, seems to realize that Luffy's kind of like down in the dumps. Especially when he tells Zoro that Nami left. And that's when he pledges his loyalty and his allegiance to Luffy. And vows to stand by his side and fight alongside him until Luffy finds the One Piece. Meanwhile, Zeff is in the Baratie. The place is all destroyed. Sanji shows up, starts sweeping up the place, and Zeff tells him to knock it off. And they get into like an argument. And we get a moment where like Zeff is pretty much telling him like, I didn't save you so that you can waste your life working here in the Baratie. And Sanji's like, what, do you want me to quit? And Zeff, I love this line. Zeff tells him, staying here would be you quitting. Like, you have a dream. You want to find the All Blue, right? You're not going to do that here. It's one thing to have a dream. It's another thing to chase after it. So go chase after it. And Sanji's like, well, Luffy told me that, I can have a spot on his crew. Maybe I'll take him up on that offer. And Zeff's like, do it. And so Sanji joins the crew, and they start departing. We have this like really touching moment where Zeff is seeing Sanji off, and he yells at Sanji, and he's like, hey Sanji, keep your feet dry. And Sanji just like says goodbye, Zeff, and he starts to walk away. And then he stops and he turns around and he says, like all these years living under your shitty roof, cooking at your shitty restaurants. And we see like Zeff just kind of like staring at him. And Sanji says, I owe you my life. Thank you for putting up with my shit all these years, old man. And Sanji's like basically tearing up at this. Zeff is tearing up at this. And, he says, I'll never forget you, Zeff. And Zeff waves goodbye. And I will say that scene was like awesome. I don't want to say I cried because I didn't. But I will say that my eyes got a little bit watery. And yeah, just to have like the fact that they were able to basically show this relationship between Zeff and Sanji in one episode. I mean, yeah, we saw their interactions in the previous episode, but this was the episode that really nailed how much they mean to each other with that flashback and everything. And the fact that they were able to do that quickly so that the emotional impact of them saying goodbye still hits. Like, kudos. That was done beautifully. Going Mary's sailing away, and Usopp's like, so, like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna go for the Grand Line? And Luffy's like, yeah, but not yet. First, we gotta get our entire crew back together. Meaning, we gotta go after Nami and get her back. And they're like, well, how are we gonna do that? We have no idea where she went. And Luffy's like, no, but I know someone who does. And he has a bag, and he pulls out Buggy's head. And Buggy's like, hello, boys. And that's how the episode ends. So, yeah, Buggy's with the Straw Hat crew. Not as a member, obviously, but he's temporarily with the crew. And again, this whole thing is like original. It doesn't happen in the anime or the manga. And I couldn't be more happy because that means we're going to get more Buggy in the next episode. You know what? Nah. I was going to say, I wouldn't actually mind if Buggy joined the Straw Hat crew, but that would completely change the entire series. Because, I don't know how you would be able to add him in. But as long as we're getting more Buggy, I'm happy. And so, yeah, there you go. There's episode 6, The Chef and the Chore Boy. Chore Boy. I swear I can pronounce that right. For anyone who doesn't know, I have trouble with my R's. So, yeah, if you ever see me mispronounce words and stuff, English is my second language, and I learned it from two people who themselves learned it as a second language. And yeah, I went to speech class for like 7 years, and I still have issues, so my bad. But this was a good episode. I don't know. I would say I like the previous episode better, just because we got the Zoro and Mihawk scene. That scene was like, I love my action scenes, and we did get an action scene between Luffy and Arlong, but I prefer Zoro's fight scene with Mihawk more than I did Luffy's scene with Arlong. Not to say that the fight scene was terrible or anything, it wasn't, but it's just I prefer the former over the latter. But I think they did the flashback with Sanji really well. I think they did a pretty good job of developing the relationship between Sanji and Zeff. That their emotional goodbye actually worked on me, because usually like it takes a lot for me to get like emotionally invested. Where like scenes like you've seen me, like anyone who's watched any of my other videos on this channel, especially comic book stuff, you'll know that I complain a lot about emotional scenes where I'm like, it doesn't work with me because we hardly had any time with these characters. So when something happens to one of them, it doesn't really bother me because I couldn't be that invested in the relationship. And while we didn't get to see too much of Zeff and Sanji together, we saw enough, and what we saw was done well enough that when they depart from each other at the end of the episode, it actually did hit me emotionally. Again, I wasn't like crying or anything, but I will say that my eyes got a little bit watery at their goodbye. I think it was done beautifully. I love the fact that Buggy is here. I thought the way that they introduced Arlong into the Bharati was pretty well done. Like I said, I like the fact that, Buggy was involved in the whole trick with the ear, even though I do find it kind of funny how no one noticed that the ear was on the hat the entire time, especially when you had moments where characters were literally holding the hat and either fixing it or picking apart loose straw threads. Not one of them noticed the ear shape bumped on it. I don't know. I'm not really buying that, but still, cool idea. Nami's betrayal. I guess we'll see how it goes in the next episode. Like I said, in the manga, she just dips out with the ship. Here, it was almost like she was taking a gamble on Luffy's life, and she was taking a gamble on someone saving him. So, I don't know. Hopefully she kind of explains, like, in the next episode that she saw Sanji, nearby. She knew that someone was going to jump after him and save him or something. I don't know. I kind of would like a little bit something there. But, yeah, other than that, this was awesome. Like, this series has been freaking fantastic. It almost feels like every episode I'm just gushing over it. And, yeah, it's just because it's done really well. And I love the fact that since we did the Syrup Village arc, we're getting basically 2 episodes for each little arc. So now, like, the plot line and stuff is flowing a lot better. It's better paced. Because, again, like, why I don't want to complain about the first 2 episodes, because I think they're great. I will say that if I had to nitpick it, it's the fact that it feels a bit rushed at times. Like, we're just kind of going through entire arcs in one episode. So I like the fact that the last 2 arcs have gone multiple episodes. So we get more time to breathe with these characters, and the pacing is a lot better in my opinion. But yeah, there you go. Awesome episode. Loved it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.